This week, the New York Times and Politico revealed the existence of a secret government program to investigate UFO sightings.
It was especially focused on encounters by members of the military, like this one experienced by a U.S. Navy pilot off the coast of California.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at this thing. It's rotating.
The program began in 2007 and ended 5 years later, but its former head, Luis Elizondo, is convinced that something compelling is out there.
What we are seeing is something that is not traditional aircraft. It's not a drone. It's not something that we can easily say, oh, that's an airplane, or that belongs to this country or that country. In fact, my submission is that what we are looking at is truly, by definition, exotic technologies beyond next generation technologies.
Here we are, nearly 20 years into the new millennium, and we still do not have bold, comprehensive, and decisive UFO disclosure, which reduces the entire field of UFO research into a failed, impotent national embarrassment. Despite decades of shallow, sensationalist superficialities, the entire field of ufology has dwindled into a tedious cliché, floundering in irrelevance. Even in December 2017, the New York Times offered a limp attempt to revive disclosure mania that scarcely raised a flutter of anticipation. How much credibility or respectability do pedophile politicians, playboy billionaires, and satanic rock stars lend to UFO disclosure credibility? Tragically, spokespeople like these only further reduce ufology to carnival sideshow trivia. Joke shop ufology. Knowledge is power, and to even assume the national security state would jeopardize its power by frivolously dispensing any sort of legitimate UFO disclosure is foolishly absurd. Investigative reporter John Rappaport sharply observed, "When you own and control the narrative, and when the press is bending over backwards to give you access, you can sell almost anything. In this case, based on no physical evidence, you can say UFO medals have been recovered and no one can figure out what they are. And a rich pal, Robert Bigelow, of U.S. Senator Harry Reid, has been storing them in his warehouse. No problem." And the man who confirms this story, Luis Elizondo, who worked for the Pentagon, is now media point man for something called To the Stars Academy, founded by satanic rock musician Tom DeLonge, who claims dedicated commitment to discovering the truth about UFOs. Wow. What needs to be clarified is that there are two types of disclosure. When most researchers refer to UFO disclosure, they assume the president stands at the podium and says ETs are real. Easy to say, tougher to prove. Real disclosure is defined as the action of making new or secret information known, or a fact, especially a secret, that is made known. Tragically, high-profile UFO research groups like MUFON, Open Minds, and Garden Variety UFO conferences like Contact in the Desert obfuscate UFO information with generous doses of entertainment and disinformation masked as insider revelations. Organizations like these serve as twofold gatekeepers to the truth. By one, monitoring the general public's perception of UFOs, and two, dispensing sufficient false information to keep the public's perception of UFOs within a carefully controlled narrative. And what an incredible job they've done, because we're scarcely any closer to genuine UFO disclosure than when Major Jesse Marcel displayed weather balloon wreckage to press photographers at Roswell's Army Airfield in 1947, more than 70 years ago. The ability to program mass populations to believe entirely false ideologies is the very nature of all historic statecraft. So why can't we know the truth about UFOs? Why, after 70 years, does this remain a topic that doesn't work socially or politically? Free energy, anti-gravity technology, and the alien reality are the most highly valued secrets of the national security state. And as long as the national security state retains its totalitarian power, it will continue to jealously sequester those treasured secrets for as long as it sees fit. So unless there is a radical internal restructuring of the national security state's prime directives, UFO disclosure will remain nothing more than hollow, inane UFO research banter for another 70 years. And yet there still remains one sure way to restore some measure of respectability and relevance to UFO research, and that would be to provide a public forum for a practical proof-of-concept demonstration of flying saucer technology, to at least showcase, once and for all, that circular anti-gravity flying machine propulsion is not a fantasy. Unidentified flying machines are by no means the exclusive product of the 20th century. In 1897, an unknown flying contraption exploded with a spectacular crash into a farmer's windmill near Aurora, Texas. In fact, multiple unidentified flying machine sightings were reported all across the United States at that time. Were America's skies being invaded by aliens? Or there at the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, were daring inventors secretly testing a host of new mechanical flying machines? Between 1888 and 1893, eccentric inventor John Worrell Keely is credited with building an airship, and much like visionary Nikola Tesla, Keely was noted for his work with radically unconventional propulsion technologies, suggesting anti-gravity effects, which earned him the dubious reputation as a humbug charlatan by many. However, it was alleged that Keely staged a successful proof-of-concept demonstration of one of his airship designs to the United States War Department in 1896, a demonstration so successful his airship accelerated from 0 to 500 miles per hour within seconds. War Department officials were so impressed they immediately classified his invention, and so it remains to this day. But over the years just after Keely's War Department demonstration, mystery airship sightings continued to flourish across the entire country. It is curious to note that Keely's inventions also caught the attention of wealthy financier John Jacob Astor IV, a contemporary to billionaire J.P. Morgan, who happened to be financing the exotic inventions of Nikola Tesla. A certain rivalry existed between Astor and Morgan, since it was known that Astor opposed the creation of a United States Federal Reserve Bank. So surely any free energy technology funding for Keely's inventions from Astor would have further antagonized Morgan. But any conflicting rivalry was permanently dispensed when John Jacob Astor died aboard the Titanic, when that ship sank on April 14, 1912, a ship owned by J.P. Morgan. The following year, 1913, President Woodrow Wilson signed the charter to the Federal Reserve Bank, and by 1917, J.P. Morgan ceased all funding to Nikola Tesla's free energy research. Consequently, over the ensuing century, with the rise of banking and petroleum industry monopolies, discussion of free energy and anti-gravity technology has been utterly stifled. Visionary Nikola Tesla was deeply concerned that the plunder-for-profit mentality of the industrial age would ultimately prove disastrous for the human population and the planet as well. He bluntly stated, only technology that served to benefit both humanity and planet Earth could be called progress. As early as 1908, Tesla revealed in a New York Times article the key to ultimate power could be found with the ancient fundamentals of etheric energy manipulation, or what today would be called torsion physics technology, a radical alternative physics that could manipulate the very fabric of time and space to access unlimited free energy and provide revolutionary anti-gravity propulsion systems. To protect the corporate profitability of power company monopolies, robber baron J.P. Morgan ordered the destruction of Tesla's prototype free energy transmission generator on Long Island, the Wardenclyffe Tower, after which Tesla faded into near obscurity. But a little over 10 years after his torsion physics article appeared in the New York Times, rumors surfaced scientists in Germany were also exploring the potentials of torsion physics propulsion. And over the course of World War II, circumstantial evidence suggests Nazi engineers did successfully design circular field propulsion flying machines. But by the late 1950s, Otis T. Carr, an inventor who as a young man found himself inspired by Tesla's creations, built a working prototype of a field propulsion Tesla engine. According to Carr's engineering associate, Ralph Ring, Otis T. Carr, as a young man, was employed at the New Yorker Hotel, where Nikola Tesla lived. The two became acquainted, and Carr, who was himself an aspiring young inventor, was urged by Tesla to pursue the propulsion technologies he had discovered, hoping future generations would be more open to new ideas. And by the late 1950s, Carr himself had designed a working prototype saucer based on Tesla's original concept. Along with a small group of engineers and technicians, Carr built a flying disc powered by rotating electromagnets in conjunction with a number of small, ingenious capacitor-like devices called Utrons. A number of prototypes were built, ranging in size from experimental models a few feet across to a passenger-carrying craft which was fully 45 feet in diameter. The smaller discs flew successfully. One even disappeared completely and was permanently lost. And Ralph Ring himself testifies to having co-piloted the large craft a distance of some 10 miles, traversing the distance instantaneously, a bilocation effect not unlike the famous Philadelphia experiment. The most amazing aspect of Carr's propulsion unit was that once it achieved zero-point acceleration, it seemed to link directly to the consciousness of the operator. In other words, as a flying craft, the pilot's own consciousness would become the ship's guidance system.
And as the light came up and dispersed around this crystal, it lit up the crystal from infrared all the way around to ultraviolet. And then Carr said, okay guys, what I want you to do is just clear your brain and use your mind. So this is an experiment. And we're going to go outside and back in through what's known as time and space. And all you have to do is concentrate on what I'm about to tell you. We're going to go downrange 10 miles. And that 10 miles downrange is equated to the vibratory rate of the color aquamarine. The colors just kind of dissolved and started turning into this brilliant aquamarine. And it lit up the whole ship. And then he said, okay, that's it, boys. Get out of the craft, and we're going to debriefing. And we looked at each other like, oh, I don't think it worked. We didn't go anywhere. We didn't do anything. And we said, well, it didn't work, did it? They said, why don't you guys empty your pockets? And we started pulling out sticks and stones and grass and stuff and putting them on the table. And I know we didn't have those going in. And where in the heck did this come from? And he said, well, you remember I told you about the brain has a limited capacity. It cannot believe beyond its jurisdiction. It doesn't want to believe anything beyond that. So you traveled with your mind, and it will come back to you, and all these dots will be filled in as your life progresses. You'll remember what you did. It was in retrospect, I did go back now, and I do remember going and getting out of the craft. There was 3 of us. We walked down this ramp. We got out and went over to a little hillside. I can see it right now. We picked up rocks and sticks, put them in our pockets, and we got back on board. I remember it now, but I didn't remember it then.
Carr was seriously intent upon taking his craft to the moon. However, 2 weeks after Ralph's dramatic flight experience, their laboratory was forcibly shut down by government agents, and all files and documentations were confiscated. The group was forced to disband and cease any and all contact with one another, leaving the project incomplete and abandoned. Ralph Ring recalls the government's cease and desist order stated that we were attempting to overthrow the monetary system of the United States, and that could be construed as high treason, and we are shutting you down and confiscating all your equipment. The powers that be, namely the power companies, weren't quite interested in anything to do with Tesla or Carr, and didn't want this information out. It was even beyond the energy companies, and it can be traced to this day back to the international banking system out of England. That's where this all started, the monetary system per se.
I stayed in touch with Carr as much as I could, but as soon as I contacted him, I was contacted by somebody. We told you to stay away from even thinking about this.
Well, what did the energy companies do to Carr?
The powers that be, namely the power companies, weren't quite interested in anything that to do with Tesla or Carr. They didn't want this information out. It was even beyond the energy company. It was behind, it came down to, and it can be traced to this day, back to the international banking system out of England. That's where this all started, the monetary system per se.
By 1961, Otis Carr was utterly whitewashed as a fraud and swindler. His laboratory was raided and destroyed, and engineers working with him were ordered to disband and even cease contact with one another. But by the early 60s, public attention was already thoroughly distracted and seduced by the National Space Program, and it truly was a national obsession. President Eisenhower had established a civilian space agency, NASA, that along with full mass media coverage of rocket launches created an irresistible perception that all of the American people were participants in a collective enterprise to put man in space. Each year of that decade saw ever more daring space launches with manned orbital flights and spacewalks, all culminating with the climactic spectacle of Apollo 11's moon landing success. But with the conclusion of the Apollo missions, the whole character of NASA changed. Saturn rocket launches were abandoned, subsequent space shuttle launches were labeled classified. More and more, the public was locked out of whatever NASA was doing in space, as if it had become a very private space exploration club. And of course, over time it became clear NASA was never a truly civilian agency, but rather a stalwart division of the Defense Department.
So a half century ago, President Eisenhower says, I can't have all these warring military factions trying to control space. I will create a civilian agency, and it will be the nexus for all space, peaceful space activity. The Defense Department will conduct all military space operations. Well, the first thing we show in Dark Mission is that that's a lie. NASA is not a civilian space agency, it's a military space agency. It was always formed under the fiat and control of the National Security Council, the Department of Defense, any of the intel agencies. All of its data that are not viewed as appropriate for public knowledge or concern can be classified. If you have a vanguard agency whose mandate is to boldly go where no one has gone before, and you know, because you've got secret documents that say it's out there, that they're going to run into artifacts, ETs, old libraries, generators, spaceships, God knows what, and you don't want to tell the people that that's what you're really looking for, then you will create in law an agency which only can let them know what you want them to know and keep all the good stuff secret, which we now prove with the charter itself in Dark Mission is what NASA is.
Okay.
NASA, every time a spokesperson comes on and says we're a civilian agency, that person probably believes it because he hasn't read the charter. I have people now arguing with me on various conversations on the web. I'm on Graham Hancock's forum in England, and there are people arguing that Hoagland doesn't understand how to read the charter. That only is a metaphor. No, it's not a metaphor, because there are several sections to the Space Act that clearly reaffirm the absolute right of the president to classify any NASA data he does not want to make public. That makes it a military organization. Simple. You can't, civilians would be independent. They'd be able to publish. I mean, science that I was taught is publish or perish. You find something, you write it up in a paper, you put it out there in the peer-reviewed literature, you let people all, have at it. You then get a consensus that, well, he's right on this and he's wrong on that, we're going to go get more data, and the process goes on. That's not what NASA is allowed, external to NASA, to do. It has careful, clear prescriptions in the law that it can only release what it is allowed to by the President and the White House and all the various other branches of the executive branch.
But while the national security state continues to publicly advance rocket technology for defense and manned space projects, does it in fact possess top-secret field propulsion technologies able to transcend linear space flight altogether? Aside from providing spectacular video footage, giant rockets are in fact a monstrous waste of energy and certainly no match for the performance of UFOs. Chemical rockets are clumsy, inefficient, and totally impractical for interstellar exploration. The ultimate secret to space travel is manipulation of the unified field, the fundamental fabric of the space-time continuum itself. Ben Rich, the father of the stealth fighter bomber and former head of Lockheed Skunk Works, in charge of operations from 1975 to 1991, confided just before his death in 1995 that the Black Ops Research Group had mastered field propulsion flight systems. In his famous quote, Ben Rich declared, "We now have the technology to take ET home. No, it won't take someone's lifetime to do it. We now have the capability to travel to the stars. First, you have to understand that we will not get to the stars using chemical propulsion." Rich further confided that linear space travel was impractical, but that all points in space-time are connected. Field propulsion systems can transcend linear time, making interstellar space travel a workable practicality. In the span of time from 1947 to 1995, alien technological realities, at first intellectually shattering, had, according to Rich, become workable scientific practicalities to terrestrial engineers.
I want to prepare you for what you're about to see, Mr. Mulder.
Faraday cage? For what?
Do you know what an ARV is?
That's what you brought me here to see?
This is Garner. He'll walk you through the science.
That's an alien replica vehicle?
Given your background, I would have thought you'd seen one.
No, never, not like that.
What we're showing you, we do at great risk. Colleagues have had labs burned to the ground and work destroyed by our own government.
Zero-point energy, simply the energy of the universe.
You're talking about free energy?
That we've had since the 40s.
No fuel, no flame, no combustion. A simple electromagnetic field. Technology kept secret for 70 years while the world ran on petroleum.
Oil companies making trillions.
What I'm going to show you next is the most unbelievable part.
Gravity warp drive, but how?
Element 115, Ununpenti.
Where did you get it?
But the media still sells the tired old space rocket public relations sham, showcasing totally privatized space launches with eccentric billionaires like Elon Musk rocketing sports cars to Mars, an expression of vulgar, extravagant comedy to decadent public indifference. And you wonder why we now have satanic rock stars selling UFO disclosure. But then again, perhaps it's perfectly appropriate to have satanic rock stars hustling UFO disclosure, since the very highest echelons of our national space program began as a convergence of three powerful occult secret societies in the first place: Freemasons, Nazis, and Aleister Crowley magicians. And here's where space science, ancient history, and public extraterrestrial research discussions slams into a brick-walled dead end: the occult. Clearly, UFO secrecy protects petroleum, banking, and aerospace industries, but perhaps more importantly, it protects the occult heart of the national security state itself. How could any president disclose to American taxpayers their hard-earned dollars were subsidizing a cabal of occult practitioners who created NASA for their own private interests? Hermetic practitioners dedicated to ancient Egyptian black magic. In 1945, Jet Propulsion Lab engineer and satanic disciple Jack Parsons set about resurrecting a system of 16th century invocations devised by Elizabethan royal astrologer Sir John Dee to conjure up Egyptian god Osiris. Parsons' beloved mentor was none other than notorious British Satanist Aleister Crowley, who himself had sought spiritual communion with aliens and Egyptian god Horus. Parsons' JPL rocket operations, along with an entire cadre of rocket scientists procured from post-World War II Project Paperclip Nazi expatriates, led by V-2 rocket designer Wernher von Braun, spearheaded NASA's inception. Occult Nazi SS scientists who also venerated the gods of ancient Egypt. And of course, the NASA director during the Apollo missions, James Webb, and many of the primary astronauts were Scottish Rite Freemasons, members of a powerful secret society also fully dedicated to Egyptian magic and mysticism. In his book Dark Mission, author-researcher Richard Hoagland defines NASA's secret history like this. Since its inception, NASA had become the occult empire of not only the Masons, but of Hitler's SS and Crowley's magicians. These ritual elitists had literally stolen the entire space program for themselves from the rest of all mankind. The space agency appears to have been nothing less than a massive technological effort to validate their hermetic visions of literally accessing the home of Osiris on the surface of the moon and beyond, to which they and they alone deserve sole access. Space is destined to remain the exclusive possession of only those with the proper bloodlines and perspectives. All three of these secret societies retain at their core a deep obsession with the gods and magic of ancient Egypt. Initiates with proper bloodlines and perspectives who understood, as Grand Master Freemason Albert Pike outlined in his 1871 Masonic lexicon book, Morals and Dogma, truth is not for those who are unworthy or unable to receive it or would pervert it. The truth must be kept secret, and the masses need a teaching proportioned to their imperfect reason. And today, Albert Pike's 19th century protocols shout their relevance to us more than ever. That's why pedophile politicians, playboy billionaires, and satanic rock stars dominate so-called UFO disclosure in 2018. Ufology is custom-tailored to mislead the imperfect reason of the unworthy masses. Fake news serves to control the deep state's fake UFO narrative. The media has for decades crafted such a pervasively false perception of our daily reality that any genuine truth is now virtually irrelevant. Isn't it obvious the entire national security state itself functions as little more than a front company for a fraternity of secret society elitists? And would these elitists, once equipped with clandestine field propulsion technologies and unlimited resources, hesitate to secretly access any planet across the solar system to find whatever lost mystical and technological treasures might be found? Treasures that held the secrets to absolute power and control? The language of the mystic arts is as old as civilization. The sorcerers of antiquity called the use of this language spells. But if that word offends your modern sensibilities, you can call it a program, the source code that shapes reality. The very heart of occult mystery is magic. Perhaps this explains the enduring public fascination with the topic of UFOs in the first place, flying objects that unexplainably flit about our skies both day and night as if by magic. But is that UFO magic itself linked to ancient technologies? Secret society initiates, far more than indulging fanciful occult absurdities, have been on a dedicated quest to recover lost technologies from civilizations far older than Egypt or Babylon or even recorded history itself. A quest to recover the fundamental alchemical source codes for manipulating the very fabric of reality, the key to ultimate power. Noted researcher Grant Cameron, in his book Managing Magic, asserts that the driving imperative for UFO secrecy is the mental phenomena associated with it. As early as 1950, Canadian Transport Department officer Wilbert Smith stated that flying saucers were a subject classified higher than the H-bomb by the United States intelligence agencies, but he also emphasized, "We were also told by American officials that other things might be associated with the flying saucers, such as mental phenomena." The key part to that is now we know that aliens are telepathic. You have contactees, experiencers, abductees, etc. All these people are talking about aliens being telepathic. A lot of ufology will leave out this mental phenomena aspect. It's fine to say it's highly classified because of the metal and how the UFO flies, the anti-gravity and stuff like that, but it's even more significant that in 1947, on day one when this thing starts, they realize there's this mental aspect, and realize that we would learn later is that's how you fly the craft. You use your mind. There's only 4% of people in the top 2,000 scientists in the National Academy of Sciences who believe in any sort of paranormal phenomena. They're the ones that are holding this thing back. Ancient Hermetic texts tell of an age when man was in full possession of skills that today would be classed as paranormal phenomena, high science etheric mastery over the earth, the elements, and even death itself. And gifted visionaries like John Worrell Keeley, Nikola Tesla, and Otis T. Carr have glimpsed fragments of this etheric high science, coming to understand its awesome potentials with free energy, anti-gravity propulsion, and even interstellar spaceflight. But despite the awesome potential of this knowledge to lift mankind to unimaginable technological utopia, its misuse could result in unimaginable destruction. Destruction on a planetary scale at least equal to the catastrophe that obliterated the ancient parent civilization originally possessing this knowledge. Nikola Tesla saw with astounding clarity the ultimate potential of such power. To cause at will the birth and death of matter would be man's grandest deed, which would make him the master of physical creation, make him fulfill his ultimate destiny. But Tesla's revelation also defined the razor's edge upon which modern civilization is now poised. Assuming the occult cabal at the heart of the national security state today actually possesses most, if not all, of these arcane source codes, does it also possess the will to use such awesome powers responsibly? Or will the perennial seduction of power and control prove irresistible once again? For history repeatedly demonstrates, whether individually or nationally, the age-old Faustian cliché temptation to sell one's soul for power and control ultimately ends in self-defeat. Absolute power corrupts absolutely.